Okay, now we get into some of the more serious objections to Kant. Those are both serious objections, but this is one of the hardest objections for Kant to reply to. So some people would say that the categorical imperative actually recommends immoral decisions in some cases. You may remember that the one of the reading responses asked you to say how the categorical imperative would apply to a case where one is deciding whether or not to lie to the police that come to one's door and are looking for say, a friend who is accused of committing a crime. Okay, so say that the police, who are very corrupt in this particular example. Imagine that they're not generally trustworthy people, the police, okay? And they're looking for a person that you have very good reason to believe is innocent of the crime that they've been accused of. And the police are looking for them, and in fact, that person happens to be hiding in your house at the moment, okay? And they come to your door and they knock and they say, is this person here? What would the categorical imperative recommend? Would it say that you should lie to the police? You should not lie to the police? Would it say you can lie to the police if you want to? Okay. Well, Kant himself actually addressed exactly this example, all right, in an essay called On a Supposed Right to Lie from Moral Considerations, I think is basically the title. It might be translated in different ways, but that's basically the title. Short piece. And what he ends up saying is it's always wrong to lie, including it being wrong to lie to the police. Now, I won't be surprised if your answers to the reading responses actually gave a different answer to this one, because it's maybe a little hard to see that this would be the answer that Kant would give, unless you already know that he gave this answer. But his reasoning is as follows: that every time we lie, we can't be acting from a maxim that we would will for everyone else to act from at the same time, because every time we lie, we use language to seemingly communicate the truth to another person. We want the other person to believe that we're telling the truth, even though we're actually not. And if everyone did that all the time, if everyone was speaking in untruths that they were trying to get other people to believe were true, then no one would believe anything that anybody else says, and so lying wouldn't work, right? The person wouldn't be able to lie in this case if the sentences that people uttered were never believed, because they were always lies. So lying is always wrong, according to Kant. Lying always violates the categorical imperative, and that includes lying to the corrupt police. Now, the problem with this answer is that I think most of us, when presented with this example, would say that it's wrong to tell the truth to the police. The right thing to do is to lie to protect your friend. And in fact, there are cases, kind of horrible stories of the same kind that can be told about the way people dealt with the Nazi SS officers during World War II in Germany. That people were, for instance, hiding Jews in their houses, and Jews were being persecuted by the Nazis and the Nazi secret police. And so the police would come to the door and would ask, are there any Jews in this house? And the person who answered the door, if they wanted to save the lives of those people that they were sheltering and protecting there, would have to lie, right? So it seems like the right thing to do in those cases is to lie, right? Most of us would say. And so the fact that Kant's answer here is, no, you have to always tell the truth, even if it ends up hurting people, it's always wrong to lie. That strikes a lot of people as kind of the wrong answer. It's somehow too severe and too uncompromising. It's too universalized. It's treating one answer as always the right answer, even in these cases where it seems like we would want there to be more flexibility than that. Now, when faced with this objection, you could actually respond in at least three ways. So one way is to say, Kant, okay, even though this result is a bit counterintuitive and seems to kind of rub us the wrong way, Kant is right. It is always wrong to lie, and so that includes lying to the police. We have to accept that it's wrong to lie to the police, even if the police are corrupt. So this is a kind of bite the bullet response. In other words, we just accept the negative result. But most people don't want to do that because it does seem like this is the wrong result. And so another possibility is to take this objection as one that should convince us that the categorical imperative is actually a bad moral guide. This is a very severe response that treats this objection as basically fatal to Kant's ethical theory. It just says, wow, this shows us that Kant is wrong about morality, that the categorical imperative is not the supreme principle of morality, since it sometimes tells us to do something that's not the morally right thing to do. Okay, well, between those two responses, one of which just agrees with Kant and the other of which just completely disagrees with him, there is a third response, which is an effort to save Kant, that is slightly different, that goes along these lines. It says the categorical imperative properly applied gives a different answer than the one that Kant gave. So that if we look at things more carefully, we can see that actually lying to the corrupt police is an activity that we can will to be a universal law. The maxim that we're acting from in that case is one that we can will to become a universal law. So let's look more closely at how that response would go. So what we need to do in order to make this response work is we need to be able to formulate a maxim that the person who lies to the corrupt police to protect this person they believe is innocent, that a maxim that person could adopt and also could will for all other people to adopt at the same time, okay? So maybe that maxim is something like this. I will always tell the truth except when the people that are asking me for the truth don't have a right to that information, in which case I will lie. Now, is that something that we could will for everyone to follow? Is this a case where the corruptness of the police means that we don't have a responsibility to tell them the truth? Can we will a world where everyone else tells the truth except when they're telling the truth, except when they're being asked questions by some corrupt entity, and then they tell a lie, okay? Some problems with that are that it seems like even then the police are not going to be likely, the corrupt police in that world wouldn't be likely to trust the answers that anyone gave them, since they would know that, since this was a frequent occurrence, that people lie to them anyway, since they're corrupt and don't have a right to the information. So it seems hard to rescue the decision to lie to the police on those grounds. I don't want to actually go into any more detail about this. I will allow you, if you want, to try to formulate a maxim that would justify lying to the corrupt police to protect someone that you believe is innocent. But the basic strategy here should be relatively clear to you. What I want to do is go on after this point to make another follow-up objection to this reply that basically shows that if we take this reply, this third option of response, and try to say, well, we can kind of adjust the maxim in some ways to show that it is universalizable, that adjusting of the maxim actually, if we allow ourselves to adjust maxims to kind of get different result in that way, that this may lead to more severe problems for the Kantian picture. So the problem is this. Once we allow ourselves to formulate maxims in a conditional way, where we say, I will always tell the truth, except when the people who are asking me don't have a right to the information, or when the people who are asking me are not, can't be trusted to use the information in a morally acceptable way. Okay. Once we allow kinds of conditional requirements on which on our maxims, or within our maxims, I should say, then this amounts to a kind of weakening of the universal component of the categorical imperative. It makes the categorical imperative less universal. It makes it something that is more subject to a kind of even arbitrary modification on our part in order to defend the morality of our actions. And the worry is that once we allow that kind of toggling of the maxims in order to generate a result that something is moral or something is not moral, okay, that we've actually we've shown, or we've come to a way of operating with the categorical imperative that is arbitrary, that makes the decisions generated by the categorical imperative not decisions generated by the rule itself, but rather generated by us in our creative toggling of the maxims. Okay, so let me give you an example to try to make this clear. Imagine that there is a room somewhere in Las Vegas. I apologize for these this is a horrible example again. I apologize for such horrible examples. So imagine there's a room somewhere in Las Vegas where people can just do horrible, terrible things to other people. Okay, so torture, just horrible stuff. All right, and the maxim that people adopt when they go to this room is, I will always treat people decently and will not cause unnecessary harm and will not violate their rights and so on, except when I'm in this room in Las Vegas. Okay, now is that maxim universalizable? Can we will a world where everyone acts according to that maxim? It seems like we can. It seems like that maxim is universalizable. Okay, so it seems like that's a moral thing to do if we apply the categorical imperative in that way. Okay, but that's a big problem because most of us would say it's not moral to just do anything at all to a person, no matter what room you're in, right? And so what we see here is that allowing a conditional element within the maxims that we follow for the categorical imperative is allowing us to basically justify anything we want to, okay? Or almost anything that we want to. Too many things at the very least, all right? So we can kind of adjust, if we adopt this policy, then we can kind of adjust the maxims to make anything that we want seem moral or seem immoral. And that's a problem. The categorical imperative should offer more guidance for our action than that. It shouldn't be something that we can just use however we want to justify or prohibit anything that we want to justify or prohibit in any particular circumstance. Another example that makes the same point is say I'm going through UNLV one day and I'm just kicking people in the shins indiscriminately, okay? I just walk by them and I kick them in the leg as hard as I can. And you say to me, how is that right? I mean, what you're doing is morally wrong, right? Imagine that I reply, and they say, and we know that you're a Kantian and that you want to follow the categorical imperative. Can you really will a world where everyone runs around kicking each other in the shins like this whenever they want to? I mean, that would mean you would be kicked in the shins, right? And suppose that my reply is this, that the maxim I'm operating from is that I will not kick anyone in the shins or otherwise cause needless harm to others unless my name is Phillip Honenberger and the date is October 3rd, 2020. Okay, so what I've just done is I've operated from a maxim that basically allows me to justify that particular action because I've restricted the scope of the maxim to something that only applies to me. I've essentially adopted a maxim that accepts me from a universal law that I want everybody else to follow. Now, it seems like it's at least theoretically possible for somebody to act from a maxim like that. And if that's true, then when they apply the categorical imperative to the maxim, if their maxim is allowed to be conditional in that way, then it seems like they could justify anything in the same way. So it's another way of making the same objection. And this connects with yet another problem, which is, why can't we make exceptions of that kind in our own case? Remember, at one point, Kant said that anytime we violate the categorical imperative, it's as if there's a contradiction in our will. We are ourselves wanting to act a certain way, but we want everybody else to act a different way. But one possible reply to that is to say, well, now wait a minute, there's a really big relevant difference between myself acting a certain way and anybody else acting a certain way. The relevant difference is I'm the one that's doing the acting in this case. Okay, so if you say, well, why? If somebody said, well, why do you think you can go around kicking people in the shins, whereas other people shouldn't be able to? Why couldn't my response be, at least consistently, why couldn't my response be, well, obviously I don't want them to kick me in the shins because that would hurt me, but I want to kick others in the shins because I feel good about it. Okay, it doesn't hurt me if others get kicked in the shins, but it does hurt me if others kick me in the shins. So I don't want them to kick people in the shins, but I myself want to be able to. It seems like that's at least consistent. So one of the reasons that Kant gave as to why we should behave morally, namely that we should that to do otherwise is to be inconsistent. It seems like there's a possible reply to that, which is, no, it's consistent to just try to get whatever you want and disregard other people. It may still be wrong, but it's not wrong because it's inconsistent. Now, Kant and Kantians do have available a possible reply to both of these kinds of objections, okay? They can say that people who make purely personal exceptions of this kind, or who have really kind of odd conditional exceptions that they place on their will, like, for instance, I won't torture others except when I'm in this one room in Las Vegas, okay? That any kinds of arbitrary exceptions like that must be cases where someone is either lying about what their actual motive is. They're either self-deceiving or they're just otherwise mistaken about what is the actual motive of their action, and therefore what is the actual maxim. They're somehow misrepresenting what the actual intention is, what the actual orientation of their will is when they engage in that action. Okay, they're either making that mistake, or they're making a mistake in the evaluation of the value of their own agency in comparison with the value of other people's agency. So a way to follow up with someone who kicks others in the shins and says, yeah, I do it, and I don't want them to do it to me, but I do it because it's me who's doing it, and I think I have a right, I can kick other people in the shins because it's me that's doing it. Okay, a possible reply to them is to say, tell me what the relevant difference is between you and all the other people. What is the thing that makes your action one that can follow a different rule or should follow a different rule than everybody else's action? And just saying I'm the one who's doing it isn't good enough, because that's not a relevant difference. We don't see why that should make a difference as to what it is that somebody can or can't or should or shouldn't do, since in so many other ways you and those other people have the same status as moral agents. You have the same, arguably the same value and you're entitled to the same things. There's nothing relevantly different about you and them. So it's possible that somebody who acts this way may still think of themselves as exceptional, but the thinking of themselves as exceptional must be a kind of delusion. Like, they might think, well, it's okay for me to kick people in the shins because I'm actually a prince. I'm of royal blood. I'm a special kind of person. But none of those explanations actually justify it, right? Because even if somebody was a prince, they still would have a responsibility to treat other people basically decently, and they wouldn't want to live in a world where, if they happen to not be a prince but to be one of these other people, that they would be subject to this bad treatment. You'll see in another video I discuss some of Rawls's arguments about what constitutes a just society, and I make the point, basically the same point there, about the wrongness of allowing certain social roles to take advantage of other social roles, that there's something very un-Kantian about that violates the Kantian categorical imperative in a certain way.